Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about Hurricane Hilary, powerful Category 4 storm churning off the west coast of Mexico right now, and it is expected to bring some significant, potentially historic impacts, both direct and indirect, to portions of the desert southwest over the coming days, this weekend into early next week. We now have a high risk for excessive rainfall for far southern California, pretty much the eastern slopes of the mountain ranges in far southern California for Sunday through early Monday morning, as well as multiple days of heightened excessive rainfall potential thanks to the moisture from Hilary making its way northward over these regions surrounding the Sunday and Monday time frame. We also have a severe threat that could be on tap for the next several days. This is a little bit more murky whether or not it will actually come to fruition, but we do have a marginal risk out for today, Friday, August 18th, for much of Arizona into southern Nevada, southern Utah, and southeast California for mostly damaging wind gusts. And then we really get into the impacts from Hurricane Hilary. We could see a severe threat develop across southeast California into western Arizona tomorrow on Saturday. And then Sunday, we do now have a marginal risk for severe storms across southeast California, far southern Nevada into western Arizona, in the form of potentially brief tornadic supercells and damaging wind gusts as the remnants of Hurricane Hilary will be quickly approaching the southern California coastline on Sunday. So some very unique forecasts for these areas, not something you see very often at all. This could be definitely a historic event for these regions. We could see historic rainfall across these areas in areas that really need the rainfall, but we could see the situation where we see too much rain in too short of a time frame, and therefore we could see some of these excessive rainfall forecasts come to fruition and quite a bit of flash flooding across these areas. So let's go ahead and dive in. So in this video, we're going to discuss the meteorology over the coming days, how things will progress with Hurricane Hilary, and look at some of the potential outcomes with these flash flooding and severe weather threats this weekend into early next week. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So all of this chaos across the desert southwest this weekend will be caused by this beast right here. This is some current zoomed in satellite imagery of Hurricane Hilary churning off the west coast of Mexico, well off the west coast of Mexico and south of the Baja California Peninsula, moving to the northwest. And this is a very powerful looking hurricane. As of the latest National Hurricane Center advisory at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time this morning, Hurricane Hilary was packing a punch, maximum winds of up to 145 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 939 millibars, so a very high-end Category 4 hurricane. And leading up to this morning advisory from the NHC, we'd seen a 70-knot increase in winds over the past 24 hours, which is some extreme rapid intensification. That was all due to a very favorable environment, low wind shear, and strong, very high sea surface temperatures in this region. Very warm ocean waters helping to fuel this storm. And also low wind shear. If you are not familiar with how hurricanes work, unlike tornadic supercells where we want to see strong deep layer wind shear, with hurricanes, you want to see minimal deep layer wind shear because these are vertically stacked cyclones. If you were to look at a hurricane from the side, you'd see a very vertically stacked circulation. And we don't want to see any disruption of that vertically stacked nature. And if we were to introduce wind shear into the equation, it would start to tilt this cyclone and you'd start to see a weakening process with these hurricanes. So in a very warm ocean water, very weak deep layer shear environment, these hurricanes can thrive. And that's exactly what Hurricane Hilary has been in this morning and over the past several days. Now, we have seen a little bit of a leveling off of the intensification of this storm. This morning, we saw a little bit of a disruption of the overall structure of the hurricane, maybe a little bit of dry air getting in there, but a little bit of disruption of the overall structure with this hurricane. So we've seen a plateauing of the strengthening with Hurricane Hilary. That is expected to continue throughout the day. We're not expecting to see much more intensification here, although this will remain in a low wind shear, high surface temperature, sea surface temperature environment for the next several hours. So we could see a little bit more intensification, but we are expecting to see things level off and eventually start a gradual weakening trend by this evening, going into the next several days as it runs into much cooler sea surface temperatures and stronger deep layer shear as it moves to the north. As you can see here, this is a sea surface temperature map from Tropical Tidbits. You see that very pronounced gradient there in sea surface temperatures, very warm waters here off the west coast of Mexico. And once you go northward toward the Baja Peninsula and Southern California, you start to see those sea surface temperatures really drop off pretty drastically, especially by the Southern California coast. So as this storm moves northward, it will start to get into cooler waters and eventually a higher wind shear environment, and as such we will see a pretty rapid weakening process occur once it approaches the Baja California Peninsula. But that doesn't mean we won't see significant impacts. This will still be a pretty stout cyclone as it approaches the northern Baja California Peninsula into southern California. We'll talk about the overall meteorology behind that in just a second. This is the latest forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center in its latest advisory. This is its current location here, again, well off the coast of western Mexico. And you can see the orange area here, pretty broad. This is the overall tropical storm force wind field associated with Hurricane Hilary. Very broad wind field at this point. This is a pretty large wind field. Even though on satellite it might look like a fairly small looking cyclone, this is a fairly large wind field associated with this cyclone. So we do have tropical storm warnings up for the southern tip of the Baja California Peninsula and the western tip of the peninsula where it juts out right there. We do have hurricane warnings and hurricane watches farther up the northern coast of the Baja California Peninsula. You also see this little bit of yellow here in Southern California off the coast of Los Angeles and San Diego. That is a tropical storm watch. This is the first ever tropical storm watch to be issued for the west coast of the United States. So we're getting into unparalleled territory here with Hurricane Hilary in that we have the potential for tropical storm conditions to directly impact portions of Southern California, especially the coastal areas there, Los Angeles down towards San Diego, Imperial Beach, Catalina Island out there. So this is quite unusual for this area and a historic issuance of a tropical storm watch that could be upgraded to a tropical storm warning depending on how things progress with Hurricane Hilary over the next several days. The NHC is expecting Hurricane Hilary to remain a hurricane force cyclone here by the time it reaches the northern Baja Peninsula. So if that can hold on, and some of the models are showing that will hold on, we could see some tropical storm force conditions, tropical storm force winds impact the coastal areas of Southern California going into late Sunday and early Monday morning. This is some model data from some of the hurricane models we use showing how this will play out with Hurricane Hilary. Right now you see a very strong hurricane there, 930 millibars or so. This is the HWRF. This is the HWRF model. Tends to overdo the intensity just a little bit, but it does give us a nice indication of what might happen with Hurricane Hilary moving forward. So we go forward, it starts to move northward, and you'll see that pressure, which is listed here right in the center there, start to increase gradually over the next several days. And the overall structure degrades just a little bit as we go to the north. This is that western tip of the Baja Peninsula right there, passes by at about 960 millibars or so, and then once we get into those real cold waters and strong deep layer shear, the cyclone structure begins to degrade, and we will see a pretty rapid weakening trend. Although, once again, right here as we approach the northwest tip of the Baja California Peninsula, we're still at 981 millibars. Still a very tightly wound cyclone, but the overall structure has degraded. That doesn't mean we won't see impacts from this cyclone as it moves to the north. Still kind of in that Category 1 phase right now. Significant weakening as it moves towards southeast California, but it does make landfall in the upper 980s, which does equate to a strong tropical storm to low-end Category 1 type hurricane. Of course, given the cold ocean waters, the structure will be significantly degraded by this point. We could see some strong winds actually directly impact the coastal areas of Southern California. I'm going to put on the winds here, the surface winds, and you do see a little bit of that plume of surface winds maintain itself as it moves toward the Southern California coast, towards San Diego, Los Angeles, some 50, 55 knot winds or so right in that plume there on the eastern side of the center. That would be impacting the coastal areas there as early as late Sunday night into early Monday morning. And we could, that could be a first in and of itself, at least a first in quite some time, as we could see some direct impacts from this tropical cyclone in Southern California. Not something you say very often at all. Even though the structure will be quite degraded, won't be a tight, significant hurricane at this point, thanks to cold ocean waters and strong deep layer shear, we could see some significant impacts from Hilary as far as winds go on the Southern California coast come late Sunday night into early Monday morning. All right, let's dive into the background synoptic pattern that will be influencing Hilary over the coming days. This is the initialization from the 12Z NAM this morning at 500 millibars. And I'm using the 12Z NAM here, this model data, instead of the SPC mesoanalysis data because the SPC mesoanalysis doesn't quite give us a view far enough into the Pacific to show you what I want to show you. So I'm using this view from Pivotal Weather for the 12Z NAM, but it does give us a good idea of what is going on with the background pattern. First feature of note is this large ridge of high pressure centered over the Oklahoma-Texas vicinity. It's bringing some hotter temperatures out in that portion of the country, and this is our typical ridge that sets up this time of year in the southern portions of the U.S. Really dictates our monsoonal pattern in the desert Southwest. Well, this ridge has been shunted east a little bit by this cutoff low that's parked right off the southeast California, or the southern California coast. Somewhat unique this time of year to see such a pronounced cutoff in this area, but nonetheless we have one here. It's a little bit of a piece that's been cut off from the main trough up here to the north, and it's just been sitting here off the southern California coast over the last several days. It's somewhat pushed this ridge to the east, and that is what is going to draw Hilary northward. Southerly flow on the east side of this trough, southerly flow on the west side of this ridge is going to allow Hilary, which is just off the picture here, to kind of shoot the gap into the northern Baja Peninsula into southern California over the coming days. Now, I mentioned how as Hilary, which you see coming onto the screen there in the bottom left, as it would approach the central Baja Peninsula, it would start to weaken due to a much more hostile environment. That would be due to colder sea surface temperatures and also an increase in deep layer shear. And you'll notice what happens here with Hilary. As it starts to approach that cutoff, it becomes absorbed in the cutoff low, and of course the stronger flow associated with that cutoff will introduce stronger deep layer shear in the vicinity of Hilary and start to shred Hilary to pieces. It will also, though, start to allow Hilary to accelerate, and therefore that is why the National Hurricane Center is keeping Hilary at hurricane strength even into, as it approaches the northern Baja Peninsula and into Southern California, it maintains tropical storm strength. Even though the environment it becomes much more hostile with northward extent, because Hilary accelerates and is moving much faster, it will not have as much time in this hostile environment, and therefore the weakening process will not be as efficient if it were moving much more slowly, which means it would be moving over those cold waters and in that deep shear environment for much longer, and therefore it would be shredded to absolute pieces. But because it's moving much faster, it will not be able to weaken as much as it approaches Southern California, and therefore that is why we're expecting to see some perhaps direct impacts from winds along the Southern California coast at tropical storm strength. All right, now that we've talked about how Hilary is expected to progress over the next few days, let's talk about the specific threats that portions of the desert Southwest will be facing this weekend into early next week. We'll start off with that excessive rainfall threat. And as we talked about earlier on in the video, we now have a high risk outlined in pink there for far Southern California from Sunday morning through Monday morning for excessive rainfall. We also have a large moderate risk area that extends outward from there, going into coastal areas near San Diego, up into southern Nevada, including Las Vegas, and then down into the Colorado River Valley of far western Arizona. So a widespread area of significant rainfall and flash flooding expected for that Sunday morning through Monday morning time frame. But that's not the only time frame that we're watching for excessive rainfall in this event. Today, Friday, we have a slight risk of excessive rainfall for northwest Arizona into southern Utah in that yellow area there. Now, this is more of a typical monsoonal type pattern where we already have impressive moisture in place, but a favorable background pattern for widespread storms with heavy rainfall is in place today across these areas. And then tomorrow, Saturday, is when we really start to see those impacts from Hilary take shape. We do have a moderate risk centered on southeast California and extreme southwest Arizona. So places like Yuma, El Centro, the Salton Sea, up into southeast California there is where we have our greatest threat for excessive rainfall starting tomorrow, Saturday. Then, of course, we have our high risk for Sunday, and then day 4 we continue that excessive rainfall risk with a slight risk from Southern California into southern and western Nevada before things start to dry out here across the Southwest. So multiple days of excessive rainfall expected here starting today through at least Tuesday morning for these areas, with the greatest threats and the overall threats from Hilary expected to take shape Saturday morning through Monday morning. Flood watches have been posted for the areas in dark green through Monday evening, where those rainfall totals are expected to be highest. Here is our quantitative precipitation forecast through day 5, Wednesday morning, and you can see that widespread area of excessive rainfall that is expected to occur across portions of Southern California, southern Utah, into western Arizona. Localized amounts of 7 to 10 inches, possibly even higher, are possible for the higher terrain areas of Southern California, especially those mountain ranges, those peninsula ranges in Southern California. We could see that 7 to 10 inch rainfall there, with rainfall rates expected to exceed 1 to 3 inches per hour. So significant, perhaps historic rainfall across these areas, and that is expected to lead to significant flash flooding. Now, why are we expecting such widespread excessive rainfall and flash flooding? Well, as you might have guessed, it's the deep tropical moisture associated with Hurricane Hilary. What's going to happen is, as Hilary moves northward and starts to get shredded apart a little bit, it's going to send an ample surge of moisture northward into southeast California, southern Nevada, and western Arizona on the mid-level southerly flow associated with that cutoff low, and some stronger southerly low-level flow that is expected to take shape across the Colorado River Valley and surrounding areas on a developing low-level jet out ahead of Hurricane Hilary. So we have strong southerly flow throughout the atmosphere. That's going to allow that moisture from Hurricane Hilary, that deep, deep tropical moisture, to get pulled northward into these regions. And that is what's going to set the stage for significant rainfall and flash flooding in these areas. And we can quantify how much moisture is in the air by using a quantity called precipitable water. Precipitable water is basically the amount of water vapor that a column of air has if it were to be precipitated out as rain. So you can think of it as a rolled up towel that's wet. That represents a column of the atmosphere. If we were to wring out that towel, the water that would fall out would be our precipitable water. How much water can be precipitated out as rain in a given column of the atmosphere? Now, as you can see here, we already have quite enhanced precipitable water values across much of Arizona already today, and that is because we've had a little bit of a moisture surge well out ahead of Hilary, helping to moisten the atmosphere and providing a heavy rainfall threat with thunderstorms today across the state in this monsoonal regime. But when things really start to get juicy is tomorrow afternoon, Saturday into Sunday. By Saturday afternoon, you start to see these areas of yellow come into play across southeast California into southwest Arizona. Those are precipitable water values in excess of 2 inches. And as we go into Sunday, we start to see even higher values as the center of Hurricane Hilary makes its way northward. We start to see these reds and pinks here across southeast California. Those are precipitable water values approaching 3 inches. That is insanely high. Just for some context here, we can use the sounding climatology tool from the Storm Prediction Center, and we can take a look at the precipitable water values for all soundings from Yuma, Arizona, going back to 1955. The highest precipitable water value that has ever been recorded at Yuma, Arizona, going back to 1955, is 2.33 inches. We're seeing values much higher than that across these areas, in 2.5 inches and even higher locally across southeast California and southwest Arizona. So that is a historically moist atmosphere across these locations, meaning that there's a ton of water that is able to be precipitated out as rain across these areas. And that those amounts will be maximized where we can, number one, get thunderstorms. When you have enough instability for convective storms and you have a lot of moisture in the air, those convective storms will maximize the amount of rainfall that comes out of them. So anywhere we can get thunderstorms in this regime, anywhere where there's a little bit more instability, we might see thunderstorms and a tendency for even heavier rainfalls in a localized setting. Also, we have a topographical component to the rainfall. As we know, we have quite a bit of mountainous terrain across Southern California. This is a topographical map here. The darker colors are your highest points. Here are your peninsula ranges here. Well, as Hurricane Hilary, at least the remnants of Hilary, approach the Southern California coast, we'll have that clockwise or counterclockwise flow around the center of low pressure. That means we'll have easterly or southeasterly winds on the east side of the center. Well, when you have flow that runs into a mountain range, it can't go through the mountains. Instead, it's forced upward and in a process called orographic lift. So that's why you have the excessive rainfall outlooks highlighted on the eastern sides of these mountain ranges here in Southern California. That's because you have southeasterly or easterly flow on the east side of that circulation center from Hilary running into those mountains and being forced upward, and that forced ascent is what is going to maximize those rainfall totals over the higher terrain areas, especially on the eastern slopes of the peninsula ranges here in Southern California. Another variable we can use to diagnose the heavy rainfall potential with this system is called integrated vapor transport, or IVT. Basically, it's the total amount of water vapor that's being transported into a region, and it's often used to diagnose the heavy rainfall potential with atmospheric river events on the west coast, but we can apply it to our situation here. The higher values of IVT are your darker colors, reds and purples, and you can see that those are closely associated with the center of Hurricane Hilary as it moves north. But as it continues to move north and that center approaches Southern California, we see those purples really start to encroach into that Southern California, Southwest Arizona region. Literally, those purple values are at the very top of the scale, so literally off the charts. And these values of IVT are 14 standard deviations higher than normal. So by every sense of the imagination, this is an extreme amount of moisture being transported extremely efficiently, and therefore that coupled with the terrain-induced and convectively enhanced precipitation potential, this is going to be a very widespread heavy rainfall event with multiple rounds of tropical rainfall across Southern California, Western Arizona, Southern Nevada, Southern Utah potentially as well. And that could result in some significant flash flooding. Really, this is a historically moist environment, as we saw with our precipitable water values, and that, with all these factors in play, it's going to be a pretty significant rainfall event across this region. All right, now let's talk about the severe weather threat that may materialize with this system. Again, it's a bit more murky whether or not this severe weather risk will actually materialize, but nonetheless, we do have risk areas that have been drawn for some of the next few days. For today, Friday, we have a marginal risk that includes much of Arizona, Southeast California, Southern Nevada, and Southern Utah for damaging wind gusts in this more monsoonal type pattern. And then as we go into Saturday and Sunday, it becomes even more unclear what's going to happen. We don't have a risk area that's been outlined yet for tomorrow, Saturday, but there was mention of an inclusion of one that could be possible with subsequent outlooks, especially across Southeast California. And then for day 3, we do have a marginal risk that has been outlined from Southern California into Western Arizona and Southern Nevada. That would be for damaging winds and the potential for a brief tornado or two out in the northeast of the center of circulation of Hilary's remnants. Now, it's all going to depend on the amount of cloud cover we receive out ahead of Hilary in these areas over the coming days. As we know, typically with severe weather, we like to see strong surface heating, that sun heating the ground to allow that instability to build and build throughout the day to lead to more robust updrafts for severe storms. Well, the problem is, because the atmosphere out ahead of Hilary's remnants is going to be so saturated and so moist, we may see widespread cloud cover across these areas each day for the next several days, especially Saturday and Sunday. That could sap the instability in the environment, not allow enough instability to build for convective storms to fire, and that would omit thunderstorms from the equation. And as we talked about before, if we were able to get thunderstorms to fire, we would not only have localized enhanced rainfall totals, but we would also have a greater threat for severe weather, including damaging wind gusts, and later on into the weekend, the threat for a brief tornado or two. Now, what's not going to be in short supply this weekend is wind shear. As we talked about before, as Hurricane Hilary moves north and starts to shred a little bit, it's going to combine with this cutoff low that's situated off the Southern California coast. And as it does so, the mid-level flow out ahead of the remnants of Hilary are going to start to strengthen a little bit, especially across Southern California, Southern Nevada, and Western Arizona. That is going to strengthen the deep layer wind shear and provide us a favorable environment for severe storms, assuming we can get enough instability to build across these areas. Again, that's a big if. So I'm going to zoom into the southwest sector here and show you what's going to happen, give you a little bit of a closer look at what is expected to happen. So here's our cutoff low parked off the Southern California coast. And as Hurricane Hilary moves northward, it's going to start to shred a little bit, and the mid-level flow, this is at 500 millibars, is going to start to strengthen here. This is a pretty widespread belt of enhanced flow across Arizona into Southern California, Southern Utah, and Southern Nevada. So that would provide a strengthening deep layer shear environment for supercells. And also, as we talked about, we are expecting to see a little bit of an enhancement of the low-level jet, especially across the western Arizona, Southeast California vicinity. Going into Saturday afternoon, you see a little bit of enhanced flow there, 20 to 30 knots or so of flow centered on the Colorado River Valley there. That is going to help increase the low-level shear, perhaps for severe storms as well. So in this environment, let's take a look. Let's just take a sounding here. We'll take one from the lower Colorado River Valley there to give an example of what the environment might look like come Saturday afternoon. This is at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Saturday afternoon. You can see we have a somewhat lengthened hodograph there, about 30 knots of effective bulk shear, so slightly enhanced deep layer shear, favorable for severe storms. Low level shear, we don't see a ton in the way of that varying we would see in a typical tornadic supercell type event, but the overall hodograph would support severe storms given strengthening low and deep layer shear. But once again, the problem is instability. Very, very meager instability here, given a super saturated atmosphere. You see the red line here on the sounding is our temperature profile as we go up in the atmosphere. The green line is our dew point. You can see those are very, very close together throughout the entirety of the atmosphere, meaning that we probably are going to have widespread cloud cover across most of these areas come this weekend. So that's going to be the main fly in the ointment. Given strengthening deep layer shear, severe storms are possible if we can get enough breaks in the clouds to afford us robust instability. You see this sounding here, mixed layer CAPE, only at about 200 joules per kilogram. That's probably not going to be enough for a robust severe threat, but if we can get 400 or 500 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE, we don't need a lot in these stronger deep layer shear environments, then we could see a severe threat start to develop with the threat for some damaging winds and maybe a brief tornado or two, mostly damaging winds here, given an unfavorable low-level profile for tornadoes here on Saturday. Now moving into Sunday is when things could get really interesting as we start to see the full remnants of Hilary make their way northward. I'll go back to 850 millibars here and show you that we start to see those strong low-level winds at the center of Hurricane Hilary moving northward, closing in on the northern Baja Peninsula. So we have this very, very strong low-level flow out of the southeast to the northeast of the center of circulation. We've talked about this before on the channel. When you have a hurricane, oftentimes the tornado threat will be maximized on the northeast side of the center, or in the northeast quadrant of the hurricane. Well, that's because low-level flow is very much is the most backed in this quadrant, and you'll have favorably enlarged hodographs, especially low-level hodographs for tornadoes in that sector, so you can often get a tornado event to occur in the outer bands of these hurricanes, especially in the northeast quadrant. Well, that is what SPC is possibly highlighting here, as we will have strong low-level flow out of the southeast. Here you see this 70-75 knots of flow here at 850 millibars out of the southeast in that northeast quadrant, assuming, again, we can get enough cloud breaks to allow instability to build. We could see a few supercells with a brief tornado threat there across Southern California and far southwest Arizona on Sunday. And I'll show you a sounding here from this little corridor just northeast of the center of circulation to give you an idea of what the environment will look like. You can see those hodographs are pretty favorable for tornadoes, very strong, especially speed shear in the lowest levels of the hodograph, and nice curvature, nicely enlarged hodographs there in the low levels for a tornado threat. But once again, the problem is instability. Now this sounding here from the NAM, showing about 800 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE, that may be just enough to afford us a robust tornado threat here with these supercells, with any supercells that form in the outer bands here on the northeast quadrant, northeast side of the center. But once again, a very, very saturated atmosphere, and this is the NAM. It does tend to overdo instability just a little bit. So we'll have to watch this for sure. Again, the question is, can we get enough instability to build for a robust severe threat? If we can, then I would not be surprised to see severe probabilities bumped up for potentially Saturday and possibly Sunday, but it's all going to depend on that instability, because deep layer shear and low-level shear, especially on Sunday, is going to be favorable for severe weather, including the threat for a brief tornado or two, especially on Sunday. But that instability is probably going to be sapped by cloud breaks. Anywhere we can get favorable instability to build in those cloud breaks will have the greatest severe weather threat. So we'll have to keep a close eye on that as we go into Saturday and Sunday, as we could see that severe threat materialize, but it's a big if whether or not it will. Now I wanted to show you this University of Arizona WRF GFS convection allowing model run from this morning to give us at least a general idea of how the next few days might progress. As always, cams should be taken with a grain of salt, including this one, although this one does do a better job of taking into account the nuances of the desert Southwest and does spit out a pretty good picture of how these events might progress. And cams are not very good with tropical systems, so keep that in mind, but this at least gives us an idea of how the next few days might progress, at least the general progression of the next few days. So this is the 12Z run. We'll start out this morning, and we'll go through today. We'll see all that widespread convection starting in the higher terrain, moving into the lower deserts of south central Arizona, and even up into southern Nevada. perhaps some severe storms in that. And then you see all that rain start to take shape and move in from the south there across Baja, moving to the north into tomorrow morning. And that is when our main significant rainfall event should commence across Southern California and southwest Arizona. Some robust updrafts out ahead of this main plume of rain. Now, once again, we're going to have to watch if we see enough cloud breaks here to warrant robust enough instability for a severe threat across this area tomorrow. And we do see a complex out here across south central Arizona that we'll have to watch as well. But overall, a very widespread batch of heavy rainfall with some embedded convective elements here across Southern California and southwest Arizona. That continues through much of the evening on Saturday as Hurricane Hilary's remnants move northward. And then on Sunday, we start to see the actual center of Hilary approach the Southern California coast. There's the center of circulation right there across northwest Baja. And again, we'll have to watch. Can we get enough instability out here ahead in the northeast quadrant of that circulation to warrant a severe threat out there? This is showing a few more robust convective elements. Again, we'll have to watch how that progresses. But the center of circulation should come on shore sometime Sunday evening into early Monday morning near Los Angeles or San Diego at this point. The track could shift a little bit, but generally somewhere in that Southern California corridor is where the center should come on shore, perhaps with some wind gusts there approaching tropical storm force across Southern California. And again, we'll have to watch if we get enough instability to build for a robust enough severe threat northeast of that center. And a continued heavy rainfall associated with that center across the coastal areas and inland across central California before things start to dissipate and move northward going into Tuesday. So that is just a general idea of how things might progress with this event. Again, take that with a grain of salt, but it does give us at least an idea of how things might occur. Looks like by late tomorrow morning, late Saturday morning, in through Sunday and Monday morning is when things should be at their peak as far as rainfall and the direct impacts from Hilary on the Southern California coast. So that's going to do it for this video outlining the overall threats and the meteorology behind those threats associated with Hurricane Hilary for the desert Southwest over the coming days. The main thing to take away from this is that the main risk with this system is going to be heavy rainfall. We could see historic heavy rainfall and flash flooding across portions of the desert Southwest, especially across the higher terrain areas of Southern California. Again, we have a high risk for that Sunday, Monday timeframe for the eastern slopes of those peninsular mountain ranges there. So this is definitely not a rainfall event to take lightly. Definitely start preparing now. If you're in low-lying areas, keep that in mind. And if you're in the mountains, mudslides, rock slides, heavy flash flooding could be a significant concern over the next several days, especially on Saturday and Sunday. So this is going to be a very widespread heavy rainfall event for areas that need the rain, but we could see too much rain in too short of a time, and therefore that flash flooding threat will be maximized over the next few days. The severe weather threat is also on the table. As we said, we do have marginal risks outlined for the next few days. Today, more of a monsoonal type threat across Arizona into southern Nevada, southeast California, southern Utah. And then the next couple of days, it's all going to depend on how much instability can build in what is likely to be a high cloud cover type environment, very saturated environment out ahead of the remnants of Hilary. But severe weather could be on the table for the next few days. And also for that Southern California coastal area, we could see tropical storm force winds as Hurricane Hilary accelerates northward. Not going to have as much time to weaken as we'd like to see. So we could see direct impacts from Hilary along that Southern California coast and even inland a little bit across Southern California. Could see some wind gusts approaching 50 to 60 miles an hour there, producing some damage and power outages. So all in all, a very unique setup for the desert Southwest. Very powerful hurricane moving northward. Again, it will not be a powerful hurricane when it hits the desert Southwest. The main impacts are going to be from the moisture out ahead of the Hurricane Hilary, providing that heavy rainfall and flash flooding risk for the region. So that's going to do it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.